ASHWIN's reputation, I think the England players probably concentrated more on keeping ASHWIN out, and they with Axar Patel, let's be blunt about it, they didn't have a bloody clue.
Right, on ESPN Cricinfo Runorder, the one thing that we're going to discuss today is who is the best test bowler currently, right? Ian-Chappell is here, Sanjay Manjrekar, Aakash Chopra, and Dustin and Gaurav to help probe what the selections of these three fine gentlemen are going to be. And we're looking at spinners, we're looking at fast bowlers. We want to know who is the standout bowler in the longest format these days. Let me ask all of you for a quick top five, as we look at the rankings as well. I don't know how much time you have for rankings these days. But Ian-Chappell, if I have to ask you to pick a five and then tell me about that one name that comes to mind and you think, gee, this guy is probably the hottest bowler going around in Test cricket in the world.
Well, I've got Pat Cummins, Kagiso Rabada, Ravichandran Ashwin, and Mohammad Shami and ISHANT Sharma are my five. And if you want me to pick one out of that as the best, I think for everything that he contributes, I'd have to go for Pat Cummins. And probably the example I would cite was the last test at the Gabba against India, when Australia produced that ridiculous tactic of bowling bounces for an hour. But the fact that Cummins, Stark was shot to pieces. He had nothing to come back with. But somehow or other, Cummins, still in that last hour, gave everything he had. I had the good fortune to captain Dennis Lillee, and Dennis was always the last guy in our team who thought that victory was impossible. And I'd put Pat Cummins in that same category.
I was curious to hear Ishant Sharma's name in your top five. Chappelli, no place for Jimmy Anderson, no place for even Josh Hazlewood. Why Ishant?
Well, Ishant's record, and in the last, I think I went back to start of 2018 and looking at some stats, and his record is extremely good. Jimmy Anderson, I mean, if you narrowed it down to the best swing bowler and probably the best swing bowler of all time, then I'd say Jimmy Anderson number one. And the fact that Jimmy, I don't know if he's getting better as he gets older, but he's certainly not tailing off. But the one thing you've got to say is that Jimmy, hasn't played a lot. He's had a lot of injuries. So when he's played, he's been very good, but he's missed a lot of cricket. And that's probably the only reason.
Aakash Chopra, Jasprit Bumrah is not part of Chappelli's top five, but he is part of yours.
He is. So my five are actually Cummins. I've got Ashwin there, who actually grew in stature on that last tour to Australia. We thought that he couldn't pick enough wickets overseas, but he could spin a web there as well. I've got Neil Wagner as well. I've got Jasprit Bumrah and Josh Hazlewood. Bumrah, if he had played a bit more cricket in the subcontinent, unfortunately, he just keeps missing those test matches. He plays only away from home. Even some of those pitches are placid. He returns good figures, but then he should have played a bit more by now at home, and that would have once again pushed his case a little more. But he's there because he's like Cummins. He's able to produce wickets at different stages of the game. He can make things happen. Neil Wagner is a slightly out-of-box kind of left field selection, even though he's there in the top five, because he's actually exploited or exposed the frailties of modern-day technique. He comes in, he pitches, or rather just hits the deck hard. He asks those probing questions. He just bowls bouncers. And he's exposed to one and sundry at home, away from home, some quality batsmen as well. So I've got a slight mix of fast bowlers, of course, of different kinds, and Ravichandran Ashwin as my spinner.
Sanjay, your top five?
It's Pat Cummins, Jimmy Anderson, Josh Hazlewood, Bumrah, and Mohammad Shami. The reason I don't have a spinner is that spinners don't play enough. And when you're looking at the current, best bowler, I'm looking at the last 2-3 years. No point going back 5 years, 10 years. And that's where, Ashwin has got all these wickets, but he's missed at least 9 overseas test matches. So he hasn't played enough for me to be applying that one very important principle I apply when looking at a champion cricketer is his performance away from his comfort zone or outside his comfort zone. So Ashwin missing matches overseas has become a regular thing, and hence he's not in my top 5. Jadeja has missed 13 overseas test matches. The others, have played enough home and away for us to make a reasonable assessment. And the guys that I've picked, guys who have done really well. And again, Pat Cummins for me, right at the top, purely because his longevity, his fitness, that he's played, right through without any injuries and performances in different conditions. So, yeah.
Okay, now I have a few questions. But for that, Gaurav, Justin, you've heard the top 5 from all these 3. Are there any notable absentees, someone you've not discussed yet? GS, Justin?
I think the only person, Jofra Archer, is someone who might come in contention very soon. He had a very good series at home in the Ashes. And maybe the Ashes in Australia this summer might kind of decide where Archer stands, because that's a big test for him. But I think right now, I agree with all of them that Pat Cummins is the number 1 bowler.
Justin?
I think Nathan Lyon is an interesting name, because a few months ago, a lot of people actually felt Lyon was right up there with Ashwin, if not better. But then, of course, it was that one series where Ashwin outperformed Lyon in Australia, which has kind of got Ashwin ahead in the pecking order. But if you look at the last 3 years or so, Lyon's performed pretty much everywhere. He's actually out-bowled at times people like Ashwin and Jadeja in India, done well in England, which very few finger spinners do. So, I don't know if he'd be in the top 5, but he's certainly right, just about there somewhere.
Chappell, you picked Ashwin over Lyon, and even in your top 5. Is that a reflection that you think Ashwin is the better test spinner? We often look at Nathan Lyon as perhaps one of the best test spinners in the world at the moment, if not the best.
No, Nathan Lyon. I've got Ashwin as a better bowler than Nathan Lyon. Have a look at Nathan Lyon's strike rate. You're talking in the 70s for Nathan Lyon. I'm going back to 2018. Nathan Lyon, to me, he gets scored. There are too many runs scored through the onside off his bowling when he's bowling to right-handers, and that really just shouldn't happen. So, yes, he's a fine bowler, but I think Ashwin is a better bowler.
I'm just making a case for Ashwin that yes, he's missed matches, I agree. But then he has, whenever he's played, he's picked up enough wickets to just merit a selection for a few more games.
I had vowed to not, make these observations about Ravichandran Ashwin. With due respect to him, I think he's a great guy, and what he does, social causes and stuff like that. I really love him. But when people start talking about him as being one of the all-time greats, and I have a few problems. One basic problem that I have with Ashwin is that, when you look at Sena, the countries for batsmen and bowlers, it's something where, Indian players find themselves outside their comfort zone. It's amazing that he doesn't have a single 5-wicket haul in all these countries, not one 5-wicket haul. And the other thing, you talk about him running through sides on Indian pitches when pitches are suited to his kind of bowling. But in the last 4 years, you watch that Jadeja has matched it with wicket-taking ability throughout a series, with Ashwin. So Ashwin is not a guy who soars above the other Indian spinners. And interestingly, in the last series against England, Akshat Patel got more wickets than Ashwin on similar pitches. So that is my problem with accepting Ashwin as a real all-time great.
I'd make a couple of points there. If you look at Joel Garner, how many 5-wicket hauls did Joel Garner get? Not very many when you consider how good he was and his record. And why? Because he was performing with 3 other very fine bowlers. And I think, particularly of late, you'll find that the Indian attack has been so strong that the wickets are probably being shared around more. And the other thing the other point I'd make is, because of Ashwin's reputation, I think the England players probably concentrated more on keeping Ashwin out. And, they, with Akshat Patel, let's be blunt about it, they didn't have a bloody clue.
Both Ian Chappell and Sanjay have Mohammad Shami as an interesting selection in their top 5s. There's no room for any Pakistani player in any of your lots. No Shaheen Afridi, no Jason Holder, in spite of being in the top 10 in the ICC ranking.
Jason Holder is interesting when you look at his record. Very good record. I know strike rate a bit on the higher side because he's one of those conservative bowlers. He'll keep, keeping the runs down a bit like Hazelwood. Very economical, but his average is brilliant, and he's had some good showings against major teams as well. He's had a test match against Afghanistan, a few against Sri Lanka, but he's another guy who was right there in contention to be in the top 5.
All right, plenty of names discussed, but it does look like the first name on this sort of top bowlers team sheet by Aakash, Sanjay and Ian Chappell was that of Pat Cummins. So happy with that. Number 1 ranked bowler, best bowler in the world, Aakash, Pat Cummins, across.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Give him the conditions, he'll run through a side. You don't give him the conditions, he'll still be at you all the time. A new ball, old ball, he's got the wares. Yes, for me, Cummins is number 1 at this point in time.
Sanjay?
Yes, completely. Yeah.
All right, Chappelli?
Yeah, I mean, he's so versatile, as Aakash said. He gets wickets at all times. He'll get them with the new ball. If nothing's happening, they bring him back with the old ball. If the pitch isn't doing a lot, he's called on to shake up the batsman with some short pitch stuff. He's such a versatile performer, and he's got the heart of a lion. So no problem with me at Cummins at number 1.